right? Even the Kabbalion, which is very, one of the oldest religious philosophies, the Kabbalion talks, its very first principle is all is mine. Then you can look at religions such as Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, the Sufi religion, and even the Kabbalah, and see that the through, or the thread, right, that runs through all of this is that there is only one mind, right, and that all is one. So there are, so if you kind of go from the viewpoint of everything is just one, like, right, we are really all one, we are really all united, but we are living in the illusion that we are separated. And in fact, we have been separated into these fractals. Okay. Kind of like if you put a light through a prism, right? Just a white light goes, a beam of light goes through a prism, or like a crystal, right? It'll come out in multicolors, like the rainbow. So from that one light, you have different wavelengths, right? And you have different things, wavelengths, but it could be different types of consciousnesses as well. Personalities, we'll get into that as well. Probably a lot of you are already working with parts and doing parts therapy. Who's doing parts therapy? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So even with parts therapy, we are still working with the consciousness, but the consciousness fractalized, right? And we'll get into that in a minute. I've been following the work of Donald Hoffman, and Donald Hoffman is a scientist that has been studying consciousness. I'm sorry. Oh, no, you're fine.
I was sorry.
And also I cannot pronounce his last name, but another scientist named Nizam, and he's a mathematician out of Stanford, and they are studying sort of this hard problem of consciousness. But he's seeing in his mathematical equations that there is some underlying substrate, and that there are emergent properties of consciousness. And then the same thing with Donald Hoffman. He is starting to prove this scientifically, that this is all an illusion, and that there is something that is underneath the illusion that is holding everything up, right? And that we are, and so we have a lot of people today are saying, oh, we're living in a simulation. They believe in the simulation theory. Chris has got a good metaphor for like being a background character in a like a non-player background character of a video game.
NPC.
Yes. And while that, so I think in a sense that, of course, philosophical wise, that could be true. I think we have this intuition that there is something more going on at a deeper level that we're not understanding. But I think in our brain, the metaphor that we can make for it is that it's a simulation. So we can understand what a simulation is, like a game simulation. And that's pretty much, I think, what we are living in. I think we are living in a somewhat of a simulation, not exactly like a game simulation, but even to the point where, and if you'll read Donald Hoffman's work, or if you look him up, he's on YouTube. You can watch tons of videos on YouTube, or you can read his book. And he gives really compelling reasons and evidence that nothing even exists until we focus on it and pay attention to it. Then, kind of like going through a video game, if you turn to let's say you're walking forward and you turn to the right and you see everything on the right side, well, you're just rendering it in front of you, right? There is no right, there's no left, there's no behind or forward, there's just right there. And as soon as you turn your attention, you're rendering the picture. Okay. You're rendering the experience, or something is rendering the experience. So like nothing is really behind me right now. It just appears to be. It just intuitively, it feels like there's something behind me. Like, okay, there's this thing behind me, but but that's because I'm seeing it with my eyes and it's being projected back to me, right? But is there really anything behind that? Right? There's something at some very, very deep level. Okay, so going from there, there's a hierarchy of consciousness. So we've got consciousness on a macro scale and we've got it on a micro scale, right? And like the micro scale being like atoms and subatomic particles, quarks, gluons, neutrons, that kind of thing. And then you've got the so that's the micro. The macro would be like the sun, the planets, the galaxies, star clusters, universes. And then we have whatever we are here, right? I'll get more into the micro and macro later. What I really want to focus on today is the hierarchy of consciousness in the human body, since that's what we're going to be working with. But before I even get there, I would even say to you that everything has a consciousness, even things that we consider to be inanimate objects, even rocks have a consciousness. Now, they might not be vibrating at as high of a level as we are. Okay. Like cats and dogs have a different consciousness than humans. Okay. But there is some sort of awareness that they're a rock. And even if you look at the Bible, even in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament, there's lots of passages that says that if you stopped worshiping, like God is saying, if you stop worshiping me, then the stones and the trees and the wood would jump up and worship me, right? So even in the Christian religion, it talks about inanimate objects actually having some sort of consciousness, but we've kind of pushed that aside and haven't really paid close attention to that, right? So if we look to the human body, is it okay? Do you have a whiteboard application for this? If not, actually,
yes.
do you? Let me see if
I
can
think
use
you have
that.
access to it because I made you a co-host. So just look at the
Yeah,
bottom and then
that's what, yeah, I was looking and I'm not seeing that, but that's okay. I just wanted to draw a little picture, but
maybe if I make you the primary host, see if it shows up then.
All right.
Do you see it?
Let's see. It's not in apps.
No, it's just at the bottom in the menu bar.
Yeah, I don't see it. Okay, hang on. Let me see if you guys can see this. I mean, any questions up to this point before I move on to human consciousness?
Jagir said Nassim Haramein. And I'm not sure what is that.
Yes.
Somebody?
Yeah, he's the mathematician who's studying consciousness at Stanford. Thank you. Let's see. Would you be able to see that? All right. I'll just do it the old-fashioned way. Use my physical.
If you want to just share your screen, you might be able to just bring up a Word document and then type in it if that's what you.
No, I needed to draw. I was going to draw a picture.
Shoot. Okay.
That's
I don't
okay.
know why you don't have the whiteboard option because
I know. I thought I would, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm showing it here.
It's actually right at the end. I can see it, so I don't see why you can't, Stephanie.
You can see it
Right at the end.
Bottom menu of the Zoom. Yeah.
Go past apps.
So past apps, it says more, and then I click on more, and it just says stop live stream.
Oh wow.
I don't see whiteboard on here.
When's the last time you updated your Zoom?
I mean, I know that I've done it recently because I've seen the whiteboard, like, you know what I mean, like when I've posted things. So oh well, it's all right. Okay, it's not that important, but also I can just like I said, do the old-fashioned whiteboard. All right, well, let's just get into the human body. So even if you go down to the tiniest. See, Krista would like to control your camera.
I was trying to find a way to get you to have the whiteboard.
Oh, okay. All right, let's see if that worked. I said approve. Okay. Anyway.
Do you think?
All right. So even if you go down to like a cell, one cell, right? We're made out of trillions and trillions of cell. Well, even one tiny cell has a little job to do, right? And it kind of knows that it has a job to do. And even one little cell has a consciousness. It's not quite a higher consciousness yet until it forms into more clusters of cells, right? When it forms into a collective or a cluster of cells, then you get a heart, you get a brain, you get, skin and blood. And how do cells know what to become and what to do? Because um, as cells are growing, we just start with one, and then that breaks apart to two, and then four, and then 8 and 16, and then it just right, and then it develops into a person. And how do the cells know what job they have? Who's going to be a heart cell, and what does that mean, and what are we going to do? But when the cells get together into clusters, right, they do form a collective. So a collective of cells will form an organ. A collective of your body parts will form the entire body. So you've got your head and your hands and your arms and your legs and your feet. All of that collectively forms your body. There's cells that develop and collect together and form a brain, which a lot of people feel that that's where consciousness emerges from, the brain. But in my opinion, I believe that the brain is more like it's like a radio antenna, and it's a translator, and it translates things. And I even, all right, so I had COVID back in 2021, and I lost my sense of smell. That meant my brain was not translating something correctly that was coming in from outside stimuli. So when outside stimuli come in, it's the brain's job to translate it. This is the color red. This is a circle. This is a person. This is this is what this smells like. This is what this tastes like. Okay. Well, something got messed up in the wiring of my brain, right? My brain got a little bit damaged, shut off whatever system that said this is whatever causes me to smell neurologically, right? Because the brain is translating everything, right? Because the thing is that we're not actually what we see around us is not objective reality. It's a construct of our imagination and of our perception. By the way, this is also why imagination works so well in hypnosis and hypnotherapy, right? Because we're imagining everything, every single, right now, you guys are imagining that you're seeing me and hearing me right now. Okay. Because it's being translated by your brain, and your brain is putting meaning to it. And it's putting, movement and color and whatever else to it. All right. So it's just a translation. In objective reality, I don't even look like this. I don't have brown hair, there's really only a oneness. But the universe is arranged so beautifully that it's like a symphony orchestra, right? Otherwise, the universe would just be one note, and it is one note, and it's also the many at the same time. And so there is a little bit of a paradox there. But we have chosen to come in and to be a part of this beautiful symphony and sympathy, right? Both. And like right now, like we're kind of going through some hard times, or we've been through some hard times. So those are just like the lower notes, and just the rah, rah, the building of the notes and the anxiety and stuff. But then we'll smooth out and go to like these sweet, these just sweet, pure notes, right? But then if you just hear a sweet, pure note forever, that will get boring, right? So we actually need the contrast. We wanted the contrast, and I believe that we even volunteered as souls to come in to the earth plane, and we can get into that later. And the reason why I believe all of this stuff is just because this was stuff that was told to me in hypnosis through my clients. So and I have a tendency to believe this stuff because of the number of people that have told me certain things, their backgrounds, their geographical locations. It just kind of goes across all of that. Ages, races, job titles, whatever. I have been able to speak to people's higher consciousnesses, let's say, and I'm getting information from that. And I know Krista does that too. If you read any of Dolores Cannon books, Dolores Cannon did a lot of that too. And she talks about, I think, like the 3 waves of volunteers or something like that coming in.
I actually started off kind of anti-woo.
Yeah, me too.
I've come full circle into the woo just from doing this and like
Me
running
too.
into these situations and these stories. Yeah, because at first I was like, hardcore science all the way. We're dealing with neural pathways and that is it, you know? And
Yeah,
then
same. Same. But yeah, the hypnosis changes you because
it
it's
totally does.
it's so hard to deny what's happening here, right? Yeah, I was totally anti-woo when I first started, but now I'm all about woo, and I'm fine if I'm only woo at this point.
I think it's hilarious when people say, was I really hypnotized or was I just imagining that? And I just go, yes.
Yeah. And both are true.
Yes.
Right. And just being comfortable with that paradox. Okay. So then again, in our bodies, we have bacteria that live in our bodies. We have all kinds of cells. We have yada yada. All right. So we have the autonomic nervous system, right? And the nervous system that just is reactive to the environment. I call this part of the body the unconscious mind. Actually, I call the body, the physical body, I label that as the unconscious mind. Oh wait, was there a comment?
Jagir said, starting with anti-woo, and then we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. T.S. Eliot.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't
And
it?
so true.
I just wrote like beautiful, Jagir. Yes.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Matt
you
had
for
said
sharing
like
that.
ants earlier. Sorry, I just now saw that. But when you were talking about the collective.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I refer to that as the unconscious mind. Of course, the unconscious is never unconscious, right? But that's just how I refer to the autonomic nervous system. So if you want to talk about the brain stem, some people call it the lizard brain. So it's the survival brain, right? That just kind of keeps you alive. Keeps, your heart's beating and you're breathing, your food is digesting without you having to think about it, right? I stupidly burnt my finger the other day when I was taking John Overdurf's training. I was in this bed and breakfast, and it was midnight, and
Stephanie, your volume just stopped working.
I'm so sorry. I think I accidentally pressed my mute button. So yeah, I'm trying to reheat a cheese quesadilla at midnight with my hot iron, which actually worked, except that
That's very resourceful.
Right? I thought so. I didn't have a microwave in the room. But I was careless and I ended up burning my fingers, the top of my fingers. I couldn't wear my rings for a while. And I've been just noticing how my body has been healing my fingers over these past couple of weeks. There's no other than me just keeping band-aids on it or putting some bacteria, some Bactine on it just to keep the bacteria off of it. Other than that, I'm not healing my fingers consciously. I can't be like, heal, right? If I could consciously do that, like how interesting would that be if we could all do that? But we can't. But we do trust that there is a part of us that has a consciousness that knows exactly what information to say and to send to this part of the body to heal it, right? To whatever part is injured. All we can do is just be aware of it and observe it as it's healing. Now, I think there are some things that can get in the way of our healing, like some high emotional states, stress, and things like that can exasperate the healing. It can make the healing take a lot longer than it needed to take. We were talking about chronic pain earlier with Krista, and it's in the chronic part of chronic pain. Why it's chronic is because there's some emotional component to it that hasn't been resolved yet. There is some emotional healing that needs to take place, and it's your body saying like, hey, you haven't been paying attention to me. You haven't been listening to me. So I'm going to keep giving you this thing, this chronic illness, until you like wise up, right? And so that's usually what the chronic pain is. All right. Then we go up another level from that. And I call that the subconscious mind. So the subconscious mind, we all work with the subconscious mind as hypnotists, right? And we all know how to work with it, talk to it. I know that the subconscious is its own unique personality in the work that I do. And I tell my clients to imagine that you're born with an invisible conjoined twin who's been with you your entire life, loves you more than anything, knows you better than you know yourself, right? Is always there sort of guiding you, whispering to you, don't go down that dark alleyway, right? And if you go down that dark alleyway and you get mugged, what do you say? You say something like, I should have listened to myself, right? So who is this myself that you should have listened to, right? Is sort of this guiding force within you, which is not exactly what we consider the main personality, right? Or the main ego. This is another part of you, the intuitive part, whatever you want to call it. All right. At this level, at the subconscious level, we can talk about personalities and ego states, right? So a lot of you already work with parts, but what is a part, right? What is it? It's a part of the personality of the client, but it's not really the main personality. It's not the main ego. So we have natural ego states, and we have ego states that are created, or parts that are created through trauma. So a natural ego state is, you were a child, you got the inner child still inside of you. The inner child never goes away. It's just that as you grow up, as you become a teenager, you push the child to the background. Like, we're not going to do that anymore, right? Because by the time you get to middle school, high school, you'd be made fun of, right? If you're still acting like a child. So the child is still there, but has just been silenced by us for the most part, right? Unless we start to act childish or act childlike. And that's usually the inner child coming to the forefront of the personality to play or to misbehave or to try to protect you, but trying to protect you with a child's mind, right? I typically do inner child healing with almost every client that I have, and I will release the inner child from adult responsibility and give the child permission to be a kid again and to play. Because a lot of times the child part of you is what's sabotaging your efforts to do whatever adult thing that you need to do, right? Okay. So then, of course, we have the personality of the teenager. We have, and that's usually the rebellious personality. We have the young adult personality. We have the older adult, the wise personality, yada, yada. These are all natural, okay? We have to step out of certain personalities and shift into other ones. Then, of course, we have the personalities of how are we going to behave when we're in a certain environment, when we're in front of certain people. We put on different hats for different people, right? So like right now I've got on my hypnotist hat, but in about half an hour from now, I will have on my mommy hat, right? I'll have on my wife hat later. So, with my friends, I chill and hang out and potty mouth in front of authority figures, cops or whatever, preachers or priest or whatever, then it's my good girl personality. Or yes, sir, personality. So we have all of those personalities, and those are all natural. And we can easily shift in and out of these personalities when we need to. Now, I'm saying we have multiple personalities. Doesn't mean that we have like DID, dissociative identity disorder, or multiple personality disorder. It's not a disorder because we are controlling this for the most part. Sometimes we don't, but we can get back in control. If we're acting childish and we catch ourselves acting childish, we can go back to acting like an adult again, right? Somebody with DID, they don't have control over that. Their main personality is like locked in a closet, and then the other personalities just take control. All right. The most important, though, of the personalities that split off from the main personality to become protective mechanisms, right? Protection mechanisms, is anytime we go through a trauma or a state of high confusion, we're confused, we're not sure what to do, or we're traumatized, then another personality splits off, and it's there to help us. It's there to get us through this traumatic event so that we can freaking survive, right? And it's really super helpful at the moment, but it's also something that can get in the way. If a coping mechanism is left to its own devices, right? After you've already used it, it can actually become a problem, right? And so it was there as a wall of protection is when it manifested. But then every time something little happens, it's like the wall keeps building until you build a prison wall around you unconsciously and you can't get out of it. And so the thing that was supposed to protect you is now the thing that is harming you. Those are the parts that I like to work with in hypnotherapy. I like to heal the client. I like to talk to the part that was the coping mechanism and resolve the issues from there so that the coping mechanism is no longer needed. Now they can stay there and help the client, but we'll just change their jobs, or we can send them off to the light. They can go help someone else. But that's the beautiful thing that we can do as hypnotherapists is work with these really deeply hurt parts. And when I say like, send them off to the light or whatever, what we're really doing is we're just integrating them back into the main personality. Because, when we're born, when a 2-year-old, look at a 2-year-old, look at a 3-year-old before the world has really gotten to them. They're just so bright and beautiful and curious, and they'll speak their mind, and they will play, and they'll be joyful, and they'll be emotive, right? And that's the real personality, and so we spend our whole lives trying to integrate back to our original beautiful unadulterated personality as much as we can, with the knowledge and the wisdom of the world as adults, because of course we don't want to be hurt by the world again. So we want to integrate these lessons, but just remove the pain. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I love the use of the word unadulterated in that, like it has a whole new layer of meaning now.
That's right. It does, doesn't
I'm going to totally use that.
Unadulterated. All right. So now, and the subconscious is sort of an umbrella term. This is sort of what I was going to draw out, is that the unconscious as a big umbrella with many brackets coming down. So we've got the subconscious, which I just talked about, parts, and the inner child, stuff like that. Constructed parts, natural parts, trauma is a constructed part. Okay, then we have the conscious mind, what we think of as the conscious mind, right? And we all know what that is. We think we know what it is. And it's us sort of paying attention. I really think that we go from trance to trance to trance to trance, that we're just shifting trances. Okay, I think right now I'm in a talking trance. Right now you're in a listening trance. Some people are paying attention and some people are not paying attention. Some people, their minds are wandering, right? And they're in a different type of trance. But whenever you try to pay attention, you become focused on something a little bit more myopic instead of expand it, then I call that sort of a conscious awareness trance, right? Also, I'm not saying everything is hypnosis. I'm saying everything is trance, which is different, because hypnosis is something that you do to someone else or you do to yourself. It has to be, you're willingly doing it. Whereas a trance, you can just slip in and out of naturally. Okay. Then we go up another level of consciousness to the superconscious realm. And this is where I work in profound somnambulism. When I get the client into profound somnambulism, I can speak to them using what's called direct voice hypnosis, where they're speaking back to me, or the subconscious, or excuse me, the subconscious, yes, but also the higher self can speak with me. Their angels, guides can speak with me. And then I'll get to the collective in just a minute. But so I'm talking to the higher version of themselves. Is this a personality? Is it the soul? I don't know. I don't know what it is. But what I do know is that it's a very, it's the highest and wisest part of them that can usually resolve anything. So if I'm having trouble with parts, if I'm having trouble with the main subconscious, then I just take it up a notch. All right, well, let's bring out the big guns and call in the higher self. And when the higher self is speaking to me, it even sounds different than the subconscious. So like the subconscious sounds like someone's talking about their brother or their sister. Like I'll be like, well, why does Krista still have this thing? And it'll say something like, oh, she's just stubborn. I've told her she's stubborn. She knows better. It'll speak in that kind of language. But if I call in Krista's like higher self or the higher consciousness, whatever you want to refer to that as, the higher self will say things like, I'll say the same question. Well, why is Krista still doing this thing? And it'll just be like, we just love her so much. She is just so beautiful and precious. And
Do you remember what it said when you asked about the sciatica? The
what
first
did
thing
it say?
it said, oh, she already knows how to get rid of this. This is a puzzle for her. That's what it said, straight up. And so
Yeah.
you were like, well, can we accelerate the puzzle?
Yeah, can we? Right. Yeah, well, that could be a part of your journey, is to figure out, like, you want it to figure out the puzzle, right?
Well, and
That
there's like
could-
different people that I haven't met yet, apparently, that are part of it, because that's also something it said.
yeah, like you were going to meet people who were going to help you with the puzzle, something
Right,
like that. So Crystal likes games.
which is true, which sucks. I mean, it's good. It sucks, whatever.
But typically the higher self is just more gentle. I think of it as, I never talk down to it like it's a child. I see a lot of people talking to the subconscious like it's a child, and it's only a child if you're talking to the inner child. That's it. If you're not talking to the inner child, it's not a child. But I think of it as like a wise grandmother or a wise grandfather, like very wise, old, elderly, has lots of experience. And so that's the way I'll talk to the higher self, as if I'm being very respectful, but I'm going to speak to it very lovingly as well, just how I would speak to my own grandmother. And then that's just a very powerful part. Now you can do things like call in guides and angels and whatever that are assigned to you. Again, are these separate from you. Nothing is really ever separate, and these have been assigned to you. Or is it just a part of the mind of the client? But again, what is the mind? And the mind is made up of very many different densities and different fractals, if you will. Right. But what I do know is that whatever this is, it's always helping. Unless it's a dark entity, which is something else we can talk about later, because sometimes we do get the dark entities, but they're also there for a reason. It's not just random. They're there for a reason too. They're also there to help you learn, to grow, and to maybe integrate your shadow self. All right. Then as you move up from that, now we get into what I call the collective unconscious. Jung was talking about, it was probably the first person to term or to coin the term collective unconscious. But what he was talking about was more of a zeitgeist. And he was talking about archetypes too. So what there is like, there is a zeitgeist of hypnotists. So all of us, we are all in a collective of hypnotists, and we really all have a collective mind. To people who aren't hypnotists, there is a collective of hypnotists. There's a collective of moms. There's a collective of like Shelly has red hair. There's a collective of redheaded people. You know, so there, whatever it is, there's a collective of pretty much anything. Everything is in a collective, and sometimes people will group themselves together and sometimes they won't, but there's still ideas that float around and converge at some, like it feels like it's in the ether, but it's at some unconscious level. These ideas are emerging together. When I'm talking to the collective in hypnosis, though, I'm not talking to the zeitgeist. I'm talking to like actual, usually they're councils. And they're these like higher level. One collective I talked to is called the Council of 12. Sometimes the collective will be a name, but even in the name, it will be lots of like a multitude of entities, but they are speaking as one, as sort of a hive mind. Okay. But it's not scary or freaky or anything like that, because everything that they're saying is loving and good. And usually they're giving advice or wisdom, or maybe some predictions for the future if humanity keeps going the way that it's going. So they're from a higher perspective. Now, some things that might get really odd, and it's sort of changed my whole belief system too, is that at this level, I can also talk to the collective of Pleiadians or Arcturians. Okay. So I'm talking with like interplanetary beings, right? And I can get their advice. And then, but what's so fascinating is that they will talk about the earth, or they'll talk about specific events. And it's not just like, I mean, how do I want to phrase this? It's like, it's not like they're just saying stuff that is it's just like super generalized that anybody could say. Yes, they are saying some of that, but they're also saying very specific things as well, which is like very interesting to me. And then do you believe what they're saying or not is totally up to you or your client. When I started doing past life regression, I didn't believe in past lives when I started doing it. I didn't even have that belief system in place. But now it would really be hard for me not to believe. And now I definitely believe in reincarnation, and that we've had just, really infinite amount of lives on infinite planets, in infinite universes and multiverses and hidden universes and things that we can't even imagine. Because when we tie it all back together, we are the one. We are the consciousness. We are pure positive energy, pure consciousness, just experiencing itself. Some people might want to say God. But even if you think about when people have, and hopefully we'll get to hear this from Krista soon, when people talk about their near-death experiences, a lot of times people will say that they saw a light, like a bright light that represented the source, God, whatever you want to call it. But even that is an illusion, because even seeing the bright light is coming from a deeper substrate than that. So even that is the illusion. There's something even deeper behind the light, right? Behind what we're seeing, even what we're seeing with our spiritual eyes. Okay, let's see. We're at, I think this will be a good time to open it up for discussion or questions. But just basically, anything that you want to talk to, any consciousness is there for you. You can talk to these consciousnesses in hypnosis. And even if you don't do direct voice, you can get ideomotor responses. Just know that they're there and they're helping, and you can utilize them whenever you need to. Even if you talk to the pain, the pain is a consciousness, that you can negotiate with, and it can leave. Right. Just like James's shingles, you can talk to the shingles. All right. I think some people are raising their hands. Y'all can you don't have to raise your hand, just unmute yourself and ask.
I have several questions, but so I don't want to take up much time. So I'm trying to decide which one I want to ask.
Okay.
Well, this is an easy one. So, did your NLP training, were you ever in conflict with your woo when you were doing that? Because
not really. Because why?
well, I'm an NLP practitioner. I've got to that level of it, and I don't recall much woo. You know what I mean? Or really,
there's not a lot of woo in NLP, but I don't extract woo from science. I think they're actually integrated together. I don't think you can have one and the other. It's both. And you can't have one or the other. It's both, right? And so I just went at it from that direction with my training. And I love studying about the brain and words and how words can affect the neurology of your brain and all of that. I definitely believe that for sure, right? And I believe that we have other higher consciousnesses in play as well.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So when you were talking about talking to the different consciousnesses, I just could, it being so close to Halloween, I just couldn't stop but think about The Exorcist, and that stuff in general. And there was some TV preacher guy who Bob Larson, I think, who was always exorcising demons, and it was just so ridiculous. I begin to see that as like, well, that's stage hypnosis. That's they're into it, and they're playing along whether they know it or not. But I was just wondering, like, if like in the do you think, like, before stage hypnosis and movies and all this stuff, like maybe 200 years ago, if that was happening, that that's what priests or shamans or whatever we're hearing was and calling it demons? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do think so, that it was just an aspect of the person that was misunderstood by the community and even by the person themselves. Could there be outside forces? There again, I think it goes to both and, not either or. I think that there's some part of you that has invited this in because you wanted the experiment, or you wanted the experience or the lesson or whatever, right? To work through.
Or you're attracting it just simply by being at that frequency. If you eat a bunch of sugar and go out into the yard, chances are you're going to pick up some mosquitoes. And I think of energy parasites the same way. If you make yourself attractive to them, they'll find you. You know?
But also you have to you agree to it on a soul level too. So nothing happens without your agreement at the soul level. And once I understood this, my life got so much happier. I have an autistic child, and I used to be like, oh, why God did you do this to me and to him? And it's, why me? And it's suffering. And why would you do this to a child? I think I was angry at God. And but then when I came to realize, oh, wait a minute, Cameron and I made this agreement together before we were even born. And he has incarnated to help me learn and to grow. And I have learned and I have grown as a person, as a soul. I am definitely much more compassionate. I'm much more patient. I'm much more willing to put myself in someone else's shoes now than I ever had been before. So yeah. And I'm not sure what he's getting. I'm sure he's getting something out of it on his side too, even though I don't know what that is. But he's here too. And he volunteered to come in,
We have a question from Jagir,
Yeah.
and then also
Thank you, Stephanie.
Danielle.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I just wanted to let you know before I run out
Oh,
of
I'm sorry. Yes. Yes,
questions.
Shakir.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to be greedy and take 2 or 3 questions. I'll keep them brief though.
That's fine.
The third, I'll go in reverse order as well. The third one. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, thank you, Stephanie, for coming on. It's been absolutely fantastic. This consciousness stuff really floats my boat. And thanks to Chrissa for organizing this stuff as well, because it's really fantastic.
Well, thank you for
So
showing up.
That's the first thing. I want to show up at everyone, but sometimes I get waylaid. About your autistic child. I remember when I was young, there was a disabled member of our family. And when you're young, you just think, oh, poor guy and stuff like that. But I remember the elders in our family used to say that people like that, only advanced souls will come down to live that sort of existence. And so rather than being sorry for them, we should actually sort of, in a way,
you should embrace them. Right.
Yeah.
I think I was feeling more sorry for myself, to be honest, because it's hard work.
That's the first question.
Taking care of a special needs child, but I think you're 100% right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lesson for us as well. Obviously, it's compassion and kindness and all the rest of it as well.
Right.
So the second question I had was about the higher self, and I just want to thank you for pointing out this difference in cadence when you get a response on the higher self, because I actually had that experience today with a client, which leads me on to my question 2A. I asked this client to talk with the higher self and respond. And I know I didn't pick on it then, but I noticed it now because of what you mentioned, that basically she was much more joyful, much more lighter, much more pleasant.
You can even see it in the countenance of the face, right?
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
Angelic almost.
Yeah, it didn't click then. And I thought, well, she's coming out of trance or something. I was getting a bit worried, but now I understand. So the part 2A of this question is somnambulism. Is that the only way you get in there? Because this client that I had wasn't in a state of somnambulism.
That's not the only way. It's the way that I know how to bring my client there. So, like I've had clients go there without me bringing them there. Or another way of saying that is the higher self came in without me calling it in. And I didn't know how that was happening. It definitely wasn't through profound somnambulism. So I think the higher self comes in when it's supposed to come in.
Great. That's fantastic. And my question number 1, when you said heal, we can't tell parts of us to heal.
I mean,
I mean, you've got Ed Martin who did the cell command stuff, and
you kind of can, but I would think that if you had any rebellious part of you, then it might not work. But you can tell yourself, but I think it's not like I think you can focus on the healing. You can imagine, you can visualize, you can future pace. And I think that all works.
But you don't have to micromanage the white blood cells coming to that specific site and then bringing the magnesium and then bringing all that stuff.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Chrissa.
Because I think the other thing that came to mind when, sorry, Chris, the other thing that comes to mind is when Greg, I don't know if you've seen that video of Greg Braden showing these Chinese medics all chanting around a guy or somebody who had cancer.
Mhm.
And in real time, the cancer tumor reduced and disappeared. So, I'm just wondering whether that's just you're accelerating the body's process.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, I think you accelerate it. That's happened I had a session where a woman had a tumor who came in and her tumor shrunk, and actually disappeared. So, but something about when you put more of the collective onto it, I believe in prayer or sending positive intentions or thoughts with multiple people. I think it makes it stronger.
Big time. Yeah.
Right. And in lots of different religions, it talks about that. Even in the Bible, even Jesus says when 2 or more people are gathered in my name, right? Like miracles will happen. And so I think the more people, like when my dad had COVID and he was in the hospital, he just had pneumonia. And thank you guys for all your prayers for that. But he was on the ventilator for 6 weeks, and we weren't sure if he was going to survive. I found every person I could. You don't have to be a prayerful person. You don't have to believe in God. Just send healing intentions, right? Just think about my dad. Just send him healing intentions. Send prayer if you pray, if you meditate, send healing light. Imagine him already healed, that kind of thing. And now he's like 100%. He came off of the ventilator. He went through several months of therapy, had to relearn how to tie a shoe and walk again and talk again and all of that. But you wouldn't know to look at him today that he ever was like that close to the brink of death. And it's my belief that it was the collective that intervened and kept him alive. I mean, I think there's a lot of processes going on, but definitely for sure, just the strength of the collective, of the group, of everyone's intention being laser like focused in one direction.
And this ties in perfectly with Danielle Nash's question. She's in the Facebook group watching this, but she says, is there anything about the collective in any religious books that you're aware of, specifically in the Bible, or about past lives? I know reincarnation isn't typically believed by Christians, but I'm curious if you know if there's anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, most major religions believe in reincarnation, except for Christianity. And
the original Aramaic version may have, though, because there's some phrases that are like, that could be.
I think in some of the books of the Apocrypha that were taken out of the Bible, I think references reincarnation. So I do believe like the Gnostics and the Essenes, and I think they knew about reincarnation and they believed in it. And I don't know why that got divorced from the Bible. Like, I don't like who is controlling this and why do they not want us to know about reincarnation? Power. Yeah, like I'm still trying to understand why we got divorced.
It's easier to control people if they don't think that they get a do-over. That it's like, got to do it now and do it the way I say it, or you don't get into heaven.
Right. I guess there needed to be a hell for people to go to. Right. That's the only thing that I can think of. But yeah, so it's very interesting. And, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, do you remember any Pleiadian messages that just made you happy when you were working with them as they dropped by?
Did you Pleiadian?
Yeah.
Or okay, so I tell you what, if you'll go to my YouTube channel, which is StephanieConkle.com, I believe it's just my name.com. I'll also give Krista the link and we can put it in the group.
Yeah, I'll look it up right now. Go ahead.
I have a session where I talk to the Arcturians and you can see it. You can see me talking with them and giving messages at that time. And this was, I think this was maybe 2020, like at the start of the pandemic. I did talk to the Pleiadians about the pandemic. I think I talked to the Arcturians about the pandemic. And And guys, it was all preordained. This was all preordained. This was supposed to happen. And yes, there are nefarious things happening. There are conspiracies, but they're not the conspiracies that we think. All these conspiracies going around the internet, it's not that at all. There are conspiracies, but we're not going to know what they are. We're not supposed to know what they are. But we had to have this collective lesson going forward, right? And we had to have these old structures start to crumble that weren't working for us anymore. Right. And then sometimes the only way you can change something is to just like throw a wrench in it, you throw a hammer in it. Sometimes you have to break a system to rebuild a system. And that's sort of like where we are right now. We're rebuilding. And the next couple of years, not going to be as tough as like 2020, but the next couple of years are still going to be a little tough before we get to a place where we're just going to be like that high note, that smooth sailing high note for a little while.
I think we need to dismantle the whole Descartesian worldview, because that's when we started doing separation of mind and body.
Yes.
Which is, I think, why people are having this whole like, NLP has got to be different from, and it's like not, we're all one whole,
right,
organism and consciousness.
It's just a different way to get to the same thing. And like my grandmother always said, there's many ways to skin a cat. So I always use that. I know it's bad. It's horrible imagery, but there's just many ways to.
Maybe we like have many ways to peel an onion or something like less.
Skin a cat. But that sticks in your brain, right? But yeah, there's many ways you can arrive at the same conclusion through, whatever's best for you, whatever's best for your client. And to me, it's like, when I first started doing past life regression, when I didn't believe in it, I said to myself, well, it doesn't matter if I don't believe in it. As long as the client believes in it and then they're healed, what do I care? What does it matter if I believe in it? If they're getting the healing, the wisdom, the knowledge, the whatever out of it, then what do I care? And that's really how I approached it until it got to the point where it changed me. It changed my belief system, right? I was like, oh, well, maybe there is something to this,
Ruthie Ann.
Oh, okay. Well, she kind of answered it a little bit, but I was going to ask you, Stephanie, how long have you been working this way with your clients?
With the profound somnambulism?
Mm-hmm.
Like 5 or 6 years with that.
Okay.
When I first started off as a hypnotist, I just started off like any regular hypnotist, and then I worked my way to age regression. I did age regression for a while.
Mm-hmm.
That was before I even started past life regression or anything like that. And
when
then
you started the past life regression, how did that happen? Just during a session?
Yeah, well, somebody had asked for it.
Oh,
and
okay.
I just decided to take them up on the challenge, because by that point I had already been a hypnotist for like 6 or 7 years, and I was ready to do something new. And I had been sort of like rejecting them in the past. And then I was like, well, first of all, I'm losing money by not taking them. Secondly, like I don't have to, I'm not going to judge them, like whatever. Like, it doesn't matter what I think. It just matters what they think. But then I was like, can I even do it? Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So then I had to get the training. It was so interesting. My very first past life regression person that I had really did not go into a real past life. In fact, it was really hard to even get her anywhere. I remember she was floating all over the place and then finally landed in some places. Then she came to see me later after I had been working for a long time with profound somnambulism, and I just really knew my stuff. I really knew how, past life regressions really well. She came back to me, and then I got her into a true past life. And it was like, which actually was on another planet, and her higher self said she's never been to Earth before. This is her first time here. So I was like, oh, so all of that other stuff in the first session was just BS. It was like, yeah, that was just her imagination, but that she didn't really, she this is her first time here. So it's like,
okay.
oh.
No, because I was just wondering if maybe it just happened during a session, but
just spontaneously. No,
yeah.
That's what happened with me, actually.
they
Okay.
spontaneously, I've had spontaneous regressions, but not into a past life. Or if they had gone into a past life, I don't think I was aware of where they were, that they had gone into a past life, if that had happened. But no, I deliberately took on the past life regression.
Okay.
But I have
Yeah.
heard of that happening to people where they'll just spontaneously.
Yeah, mine like went into this whole life in ancient Rome where he was a soldier who was responsible for carrying out the decision that killed thousands of his men. But it wasn't his decision. He was answering to a higher up, but he carried that guilt through several lifetimes with him.
Right.
This one.
Which
And
I think
his-
even makes it more powerful when you're not even looking for it, right?
Well, and then he released it and it changed him.
Yeah.
Changed him. So yeah. Nicole has something interesting to say. I know we're already past our time. I can still go a little bit longer.
I can
though.
keep going.
Okay.
I'm
Nicole
good.
Donaldson in Facebook said, question, there are many people who claim to have been Cleopatra in a former life. I know of one personally. That's funny. I do too. I really do. Like, I just met her. Anyway, she says, I have a theory on why this is, but I'd be interested in hearing your point of view on this.
Okay. Dolores Cannon talks about soul imprinting. And basically, all right, basically that means that you can go into the Akashic records and you can sort of choose the attributes from people that you want. So like Cleopatra or Napoleon or whoever, and you can get their attributes. And then because you've got their attributes coming in, and then we go through the veil that we forget like who we are. If we do a regression and we're tapping into that part of the soul's attributes, the person may really think that they are actually Cleopatra, but really it's just a soul imprint. That's what Dolores Cannon says. And that sounds plausible to me. Another theory, I had heard another theory too. What did I hear about that?
This sort of sounds a little bit like the deep trance identification that Sean Carson does, but in this life, as opposed to picking up attributes from multiple places.
Yeah. So like right. Yeah. Like somehow you identified with that person or that personality at some point in your life and you just got really, go ahead.
If it's attributes, then Cleopatra is just like a label, right? So
or like an archetype.
Yeah, like an archetype.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Never thought of it.
Yeah. And then and if you really think about it, okay, so like you got the oversoul. Maybe and here's the other thing. You have the oversoul, and the oversoul is in actually many different bodies. This is something that's kind of mind-blowing. And I had a client in profound somnambulism explain this to me. But then I think I heard Dolores Cannon or someone else talk about it too. But there are actually more people walking around this planet that share your same soul in a different body. In the oversoul, but it also extends into past lives too. So you could be sharing with different people and future lives, which there's no such thing as past, present, or past or future. Everything is all happening now, right? There is really no such thing as that. But it could also be like, yes, there could be 5 people walking around this planet right now who are also Cleopatra too, right? In the past life and in the future life. So my client was, he said there was like, I can't remember the number, I have to go back and listen to that again, but 4 or 5 people who shared the same oversoul that he has. So the same collective soul. And then they were on the planet for a reason, right? Collectively. And they're helping in different parts of the planet. So this stuff can get like pretty mind blowing. And we can go down some deep.
Playing a video game where like you get to play in one avatar for one game, but then maybe you choose different attributes for a completely different avatar, same game, but maybe later in the game or a different level of the game, you've up-leveled your character. And
perfect. Or maybe you have 2 controllers and you're playing both characters.
And you're playing both. You happen to be that good, you might as well. I've had I think 4 people now who have identified that they are living concurrent lives. like they're currently incarnated in more than one body.
Yeah, concurrent lives, right.
Or parallel lives, I think is what Dolores Cannon calls them. But they're like, one of them was 23, but like the concurrent life that she was connected to was older than her. He was like 28 or something. So it's not like they're twinsies or anything. It's not twin flames.
Right.
It's like it's oversoul situation, I guess.
Right. And they're not, and they could be, different genders, and they're not going to necessarily look like you either.
One
Or
woman
this is-
said that she was living hundreds. Like she had a pretty grand oversoul that was like of a Hindu teacher variety, and that part of its evolution was to then incarnate into many all over the planet,
right.
all around the same time.
And
So
in the
it's-
convoluted universe, Dolores Cannon talks about how also every time you make a decision, a part of you splits off, and one part of you follows a binary decision, like go left, go right, push up your glasses, don't push up your glasses, and it just and so you got
mind-boggling
infinite versions of yourself living out. There's a self that never became a hypnotist, and I don't know what she's doing. She's having a miserable life, but you know what I mean? Like there's that part that did not quit that corporate job, and so that's so fascinating too. Like, wow, if we have all of these just but yet
maybe that's why I was agoraphobic before, because I was just like, I am living way too many lives right now.
Could be.
I just need to like have one where I get to rest.
Yeah. I get things where, I chalk it up to hormones, but sometimes I'll just feel like real sad or something else. I'll even start crying. I don't even know why. Like there's nothing wrong. Nothing is happening right now, but it could be one of my concurrent lives, that she's sad and I'm just helping her carry this emotion, right? Or I've tapped into it somehow. So
more of a reason to not feel guilty or ashamed when you're feeling bad. Don't feel bad about feeling bad. Just get through
absolutely. Yeah. My grandmother, who she lived to be 104 before she passed, and I think she passed in like 2015 or something like that. But she said that she used to never cry. Nothing like really ever bothered her. Even when she was hormonal, she just like never cried. And then she thought there was something wrong with her because she could never cry. So she prayed for the gift of tears. And then she said she cried for everyone. She picked up everybody's feelings, everyone's emotions, but she kept that with her because she thought of that as a gift from God, like she's helping relieve their pain. So by her crying for them, it helps them, just release some of that emotional, whatever toxicity that they were feeling.
As long as she didn't hang on to it, that's a beautiful gift to be able to give someone.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. But yes, there's
That
like
also gives me insight into my grandmother. I think she was pissed off for the world, but it just ended up acting like she was pissed off at the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's just like so many beautiful rabbit holes we can go down. And even you were talking about parallel lives, like people are living, like there's a whole nother parallel. We could talk about that too. There's a whole nother parallel Earth, and people are living in different dimensions and densities, right? And then sometimes you can get a glimpse into that. And sometimes I think that's what a hallucination is, either negative or positive. I think sometimes we're just glimpsing into this other world. I remember one time I had this negative hallucination. We call it the Charlie Brown tree because it looks like the little Charlie Brown Christmas tree in the front of my neighborhood. And every Christmas we hang just like one ornament on it to make it look like the Charlie Brown thing. And so I always, when I'm driving to my neighborhood, I always look at the Charlie Brown tree, and because it makes me happy just to look at it. And one day I'm like, oh my God, what happened to the Charlie Brown tree? It was not there. I was like, oh, somebody just, it was an ugly tree, but we loved it as a community, as the subdivision. And I was so mad. I'm like, somebody chopped down our Charlie Brown tree. So I get home and I go onto Facebook, I go onto our neighborhood group, and I'm like, who took down the Charlie Brown tree? You know, in like big letters. And I'm like all upset about this and everything. And then I wait, and then a message pops up, and it's a picture of the Charlie Brown tree at the front of the neighborhood. They're like, it's right there, Stephanie. I was like, oops. My brain did not see it. My eyes
Or
were
maybe it
looking at
wasn't
it, my
there that
brain.
day. That happened to a
wasn't.
picnic bench at the dog park. I think I told Shelly about that, just 3 blocks from my house. This picnic bench that's cemented into the ground and had cracks in the cement suddenly appeared one day. I've lived here since 1996. It's never been there. I've been to that dog park hundreds of times. One day it showed up as if it had been there for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And I took pictures of it and sent it to my kids. And I was like, have you guys ever seen this picnic bench here? And they're like, that's always been there, Mom. I'm like, it's never been there. I swear to God, it's never been there.
Right. It's
They're
like, where have we been living? Right.
"Oh,
We slip into like these alternate parallel universes. And I think that
see how we
happens.
end up in the psych ward." No, I'm just kidding. Gotta keep a little lid on the woo sometimes.
Yeah. But we're amongst friends, right?
I'm just joking. Don't keep a lid on the woo, Stephanie, please. I love our conversation so much.
Yeah, no, I've had to
Yeah.
come out of the closet being woo. I mean, I really, it was really scary to sort of come out to my family because of just the deep-seated, Christian background and conservative background that my family's had.
Oh, and you're in the South too.
Yeah, in the South. So
I think it's almost easier to come out of the closet as anything else in the
yeah. Yeah,
South.
for sure. So, and I'm still coming out to some people. But most people, but now they're just like, oh, that's just quirky Stephanie, whatever. That's just her quirkiness. So I'm like, okay, that's fine.
My kids roll their eyes now. They're just like, ugh, whatever.
Oh
Mom."
yeah. My kids. Yeah. They think, my autistic son told me that I needed to seek therapy and I said, well, I don't necessarily believe in all of this stuff, but I was watching a show about Atlantis or something, and how the ancient Atlanteans built the pyramids. And he was like, what is this crap you're watching, Mom? You really seriously need therapy. And I was like, I don't necessarily believe in this, Cameron, but I do have an open mind. And then he goes, can your mind be so open that your brains fall out? It's like, well, I think my brains have fallen out a long time ago, if that's the case.
That's oh my gosh. I was just looking to see if anybody else said anything. No more questions, just a few comments that you can read later. So,
Yeah.
but Jagier did say something about Parallel
Local
Timelines,
gangers.
Immortal Talks by Shunya is an interesting.
Ooh, okay. Thank you. I will. Immortal Talks.
Yeah, you can just Google it. It's really, really interesting. I was just reminded by when Krista mentioned this bench just appearing out of nowhere. And in that Shunya thing, he talks about how he skips from one timeline into another one, and his mother, he doesn't exist in one and does exist in another one. It's very interesting. It's heavy
Ooh,
going.
cool.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I'll put the
Yeah, and you also said makes me think of doppelgangers too.
yeah, when you were talking about these well, I can't remember, but at that point,
these people
always wondered about that.
coexisting with the same
Yeah.
oversoul.
It's like it's like we're made from a template. Something.
Yeah.
There's many versions of us.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Really interesting.
For
Hey,
sure.
Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
I want to clarify something you said earlier. So when you were going to the layers, you said, I think there's the unconscious, which you believe is the body,
Mm-hmm.
and then the subconscious, then the conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Then did you say super conscious or super?
The super
unconscious?
conscious, which is the higher
Superconscious.
self. Yeah.
And then the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I figured it out on my own, or I read it and it made sense based on based on, watching people move,
Mhm.
for a living. But the body being the unconscious mind, that has to be right. It makes so much sense. There's, because people have one sides of their body, they're just so much tighter than the other, or and then a hip goes this way or that way,
Mm.
and it could all be from they're protecting a foot, that that there's a bruise or there's a spur or something in it, and they don't even know that they're doing that,
Right.
and it's when I blew my left arm up. Well, I ruptured my distal bicep tendon, and
Oh.
sorry if anyone's squeamish, I apologize. But like, for the longest time, this is the weirdest thing. Like, I was convinced that my left arm was shorter than my right arm.
Huh.
Yeah, and I would look at it, I would be in the gym, I would look in the mirror, and I would be like, oh my God, look, what the hell? How? I've 45 years I've lived, and I'm just now noticing this.
Yeah.
And I was doing this and that, and of course, this arm had atrophied, so it was definitely smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went for months thinking that, and thinking like, geez, if I ever start boxing again, I should probably go southpaw, because my right arm's longer, I have more reach. And I just had accepted it. And then I told a fellow trainer, who is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and I said, yeah, my left arm's longer, or shorter than my right. And she said, no, it isn't. I said, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I go, look. So we look in the mirror. She said, no, it's not. And she measured it. She measured, humerus bone and everything. And then, like, right away. And it was because I was walking around like this,
Ah.
And yeah, because they thought when I injured myself that I was going to re-injure it, because I was some
Yeah.
dumb meathead that was going to go try pull-ups, a week after surgery. And I'm exactly the opposite. I didn't want to lose my arm again,
Yeah.
So I walked around like this, like deathly afraid it was going to re-injure, because they pretty much told me, that I was going to be the one to do that. They put the fear of God in me, basically.
Mm.
And then it's so weird. And then I like I said, I see people like they step strange because something hurts, or they think it hurts, or they don't know, but it's all so that makes
It's all connected. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for showing up. Thank you, Krista, for having me. I really enjoyed my time with you all.
Are you okay if I upload this to YouTube at some point?
Yes.
I haven't created the channel or whatever, but like,
Of course. Yeah. And I would be happy to also upload it to mine if you want to send me.
fantastic. All right.
Video.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Bye, Stephanie. And let's get
Krista.
together soon.
Yes, for sure.
Bye. Bye, Shelley.